There is a moment, maybe you've had it, when you are standing in the wreckage of something you tried so hard to keep alive and you finally understand that your grip was never love. It was fear wearing love's clothing. I want to talk to you tonight about letting go, but not the shallow kind, not the kind they print on coffee mugs. I want to talk about the terrifying, wholly disorienting experience of opening your hands when every instinct in your body is screaming asterisk. Close them, don't you dare let this slip away. Asterisk, because here is the truth none of us want to hear when we are young and hungry and certain. Some of the most important work of your life will not be building, it will be releasing. Think about the human hand for a moment. It is one of the most remarkable instruments nature ever designed, capable of surgery, of sculpture, of holding a newborn's entire skull in one palm. But a hand clenched into a fist can do almost nothing. It cannot receive, it cannot create, it cannot even feel really, because it has sacrificed sensation for control. We spend so much of our lives clenched. We clench around people who have already left emotionally, hoping our grip alone can resurrect what's gone. We clench around jobs that have quietly been draining us for years, mistaking exhaustion for loyalty. We clench around old versions of ourselves, the identity we built at 22, the reputation we earned at 30, the story we told about who we were supposed to become. And we hold on long after life has been gently, then not so gently asking us to open our hand. And every time the universe or fate or God or whatever word feels true to you has to get louder, because we didn't listen at the whisper. There's an old idea, ancient really, found in nearly every spiritual tradition on earth in some form, that there is an intelligence larger than our understanding, quietly rearranging our lives, not to punish us, but to edit us, like a sculptor who sees the finished form trapped inside the marble long before the marble does. And sculpting, if you've ever watched it done, is not really an act of addition. It is almost entirely subtraction. The artist isn't building the shape. He's removing everything that isn't the shape. What if your life is being sculpted the same way? What if the friendship that dissolved wasn't a failure, but a chisel stroke? What if the door that slammed shut in your face, the rejection letter, the diagnosis, the goodbye you didn't choose, wasn't cruelty, but correction, not punishment for who you were, but preparation for who you're becoming? I'm not telling you this to erase your pain. Pain is real. Grief is real. I would never stand here and tell you that heartbreak is secretly a blessing in disguise, because that's the kind of thing people say when they've never actually sat inside the wreckage themselves. No, I'm telling you something harder and more honest. The pain was real, it was also making room. Both things are true at once. That's what maturity actually is. The ability to hold two truths without needing to collapse them into one simple answer. Here's what forcing really is, underneath all its disguises. Forcing is fear dressed up as determination. It's the refusal to trust that you will be okay without the thing you're gripping. It says, if I let go, I will disappear. It says, my worth is tied to whether I can make this work. And so we override every quiet signal, the exhaustion, the resentment, the dread in our stomach before we even open our eyes in the morning. Because admitting the truth feels more dangerous than living the lie. But listen to me carefully. Anything that requires you to constantly force it into existence was never yours to keep. Not because you don't deserve good things, not because you're not capable, but because what is actually yours, your calling, your people, your becoming, doesn't need to be dragged into place by your bare hands bleeding. It arrives, and it stays, with a kind of ease that coexists with effort, but never with violence. Toward yourself. There's a difference between working hard for something and fighting the current of your own life to keep something afloat that has already, quietly drowned. I think of the river. Water is the softest thing in the world. And yet given enough time, it carves canyons into solid rock, not by force, by surrender to its own nature, by simply continuing to be water, flowing where it is allowed to flow, patient beyond anything we can imagine, wearing down mountains, not through aggression, but through persistence without resistance. We could learn something from that. We think strength means gripping tighter. But sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is unclench a hand that has been white-knuckled for years, around an old identity, an old wound, an old version of a relationship that only exists now in memory, and simply let the current take it. This is not weakness. Let me say that again, because somewhere in this room there is someone who has been taught, maybe since childhood, that surrender equals defeat. Surrender is not defeat. Surrender is trust in a larger design than the one your fear can see. There's a story, you may have heard some version of it, about a man clinging to a tree branch, hanging over a cliff in the dark, screaming into the void, "Is anyone there? Someone help me." And a voice answers, "I am here. Let go, I will catch you." And the man, terrified, shouts back, "Is there anyone else?" We laugh at that story because we recognize ourselves in it. We want the miracle, but we want to keep our grip on the branch too. We want transformation without release. We want the new chapter, but we keep rereading the old one, hoping if we read it enough times the ending will change. It won't. Some chapters are finished not because they failed, but because they succeeded. They did their job. They taught you what they came to teach. And a chapter that has finished its purpose does not become more meaningful by being extended past its natural end. It only becomes exhausting. I want to gently ask you something, and you don't have to answer out loud. Just sit with it. What have you been forcing? What relationship? What career? What image of yourself have you been holding together with sheer will, bracing your whole body against a truth that arrived a long time ago and simply hasn't been given permission to land? Because here's the quiet, uncomfortable secret about forcing. It is exhausting in a very specific way. Not the good tired of honest effort, but the hollow tired of maintaining something that has already secretly ended. You feel it in your shoulders, in your sleep, in the way your joy has started to feel rationed, like you're spending it from a account that never gets refilled. That tiredness is information. Your body has been trying to tell you something your pride has refused to hear. Letting go doesn't mean giving up on your life. It means giving up your authorship, of every single detail, trusting that there is a larger narrative structure at work, one you cannot see from inside your own chapter, the way a character in a novel cannot see the shape of the whole book. Every story you've ever loved has a moment where the protagonist loses something essential, a home, a person, an old certainty, right before the transformation that makes them who they were always meant to become. We call that the dark night. Every mythology has it. Every psychology has it. It is not a flaw in the design of human life. It is the design. The caterpillar does not build the butterfly. It dissolves. Inside the chrysalis, in total darkness, the caterpillar's body actually breaks down into something close to formless liquid before it reorganizes into wings. If you cut open a chrysalis at the wrong moment, you wouldn't find a half caterpillar, half butterfly. You would find something that looks, honestly, like failure, like nothing, like it's been undone. But it hasn't been undone. It's being remade. And I promise you, there have been seasons in your life that looked like undoing from the inside, that were actually the quiet architecture of your becoming. So what do we do practically with all of this? How do you actually let go of something you've spent years, maybe decades, forcing? You start by telling the truth to yourself. Not the polished version for other people. The raw version, at 2 a.m, in the silence, when no one is watching and there's nothing left to perform. You ask, is this still alive, or am I the only thing keeping it breathing? And when the answer comes, and it will come, because some part of you has known it for a long time, you don't have to act on it violently. You don't have to burn the house down in one night. Surrender is not always dramatic. Sometimes it's as quiet as simply not reaching for something the next time your hand instinctively goes toward it. Sometimes it's one honest sentence to another person. Sometimes it's just permission. Permission to stop pretending you're fine with something that has been quietly breaking you for a long time. And here is the part one most want you to remember, long after tonight, long after you've forgotten the exact words I used to say it. The things that are actually meant for you are not waiting behind a door you have to kick down. They are waiting behind a door that opens the moment your hands are finally empty enough to turn the handle. You cannot receive with a closed fist. You cannot be filled with something new while your arms are still full of something old. Every master builder in history has understood this same law in a different language. Before the cathedral rises, the ground must be cleared. Before the garden blooms, the old growth must be cut back. Before the new self can stand, the old self, the roles, the relationships, the beliefs that no longer fit must be allowed to fall away, not as loss, but as harvest. You are not falling apart, you are being cleared. So tonight, I am not going to tell you to try harder. I'm not going to tell you to grip tighter, to fight more, to force the outcome through sheer will, because I don't think that's what your soul actually needs right now. I think what you need is permission. Permission to stop forcing the thing that was already leaving. Permission to trust that the same intelligence that grew a forest from a single buried seed, that turns grief into wisdom and endings into beginnings, is still, right now, quietly working on your behalf, even in the parts of your life that look, from where you're standing, like ruin. Let it work. Open your hands, not because you're giving up, but because you finally understand that anything worth keeping was never something you had to hold on to by force in the first place. It was always going to hold on to you. There's a moment in early childhood, before language fully takes hold, when a baby learns one of the first physical lessons of being alive, how to close a hand around something. It's instinctive, almost violent in its intensity. Watch an infant grip your finger and you'll feel a strength that seems disproportionate to their size. That grip is survival. It's the nervous system saying, hold on, don't let this go. Your life depends on contact. And for a long time, that instinct serves us well. But somewhere along the way, most of us never learn the second lesson, the harder one, the lesson of opening the hand again. Think about what a closed fist can actually do. It can strike. It can defend. It can clench in pain or rage or fear. But it cannot receive anything. You cannot be handed a gift while your fingers are already curled around something else. You cannot shake another person's hand, cannot feel the texture of water, cannot catch what's falling toward you, if your fist is already occupied holding on to what has already quietly stopped being yours. This is not a metaphor about physical hands only. It's a description of the exact posture so many of us carry through our entire adult lives. We walk around gripping old identities, old relationships, old versions of a future we were promised. And we wonder why nothing new seems to be landing in our lives. Nothing new can land. There's no room. The hand is full. And here is what makes this so painful, so human. Often what we are gripping isn't even something good anymore. It's just familiar. Familiarity feels like safety even when it has stopped nourishing us, because the nervous system doesn't ask is this good for me? It asks is this known? We will choose a known ache over an unknown peace almost every time. Not because we're weak, but because that's how survival wiring works. Letting go doesn't just feel like loss. It feels on some primal level like danger. But control was always an illusion built to manage fear, not to shape reality. You can force a conversation, but you cannot force intimacy. You can force a job title, but you cannot force belonging. You can force someone to stay in a room, but you cannot force them to stay in your life. The things that matter most, trust, love, purpose, peace, have never once in human history responded to force. They respond only to space, to the kind of stillness that says, I am no longer gripping you into existence. I am simply here, open, and if you are meant to stay, you will. This is why trust is so much harder than control, and also why it's so much more powerful. Control says, I don't believe anything good will come unless I make it happen with my own hands. Trust says, I believe something is already in motion that is wiser than my fear, and my job is not to force it, but to stop blocking it. An open hand isn't passive. It isn't giving up. It is, paradoxically, the most active form of faith there is, the willingness to stand in uncertainty without collapsing it through sheer grip strength, because you finally understood that some things can only be received, never seized. There's a story sculptors tell about Michelangelo. Whether it's true or apocryphal almost doesn't matter, because it captures something too precise to ignore. When asked how he created the David, he supposedly said he didn't create anything. The figure was already inside the marble, and his only job was to remove everything that wasn't David. Think about what that means. The masterpiece wasn't built up from nothing. It was uncovered by taking away. Every strike of the chisel wasn't adding value. It was subtracting what didn't belong, until what remained was inevitable, was true, was the only shape that could have ever been there. Most of us live with the opposite assumption about our own becoming. We think transformation is additive, one more credential, one more relationship, one more achievement stacked onto the last, building ourselves upward like a tower. And certainly some growth works that way. But the deepest transformations, the ones that actually change who we are at the root, rarely happen through addition. They happen through loss. Through the chisel strike of a friendship that ends, a version of yourself that no longer fits, a certainty that gets stripped away by circumstance you never asked for. It doesn't feel like sculpture in the moment. It feels like destruction. It feels like something is being taken from you that you needed. But marble doesn't know it's becoming a masterpiece while it's being carved. It only feels the pressure, the fracture, the pieces falling away that it assumed were part of its permanent shape. From inside the stone, there is no way to distinguish an act of ruin from an act of revelation. Both look, in the moment, exactly the same. Sharp, sudden, and irreversible. This is why so much of our suffering isn't really about the loss itself. It's about our interpretation of the loss. The story we tell ourselves that says this subtraction means I am less than I was. Rather than this subtraction is revealing more of what I actually am. We resist the chisel because we've confused the marble for the masterpiece. We think the raw block, our habits, our attachments, our old defensive shapes, is who we are, when really it was only ever the material we were given to become someone with. And here's the part that separates genuine transformation from mere accumulation. You cannot skip the removal. There is no version of the David that exists without the marble that was cut away and left on the studio floor. There is no version of your becoming that exists without the relationships that ended, the identities that dissolved, the plans that had to die so something truer could take their place. The pieces on the floor aren't waste. They're evidence. They're proof that something real is happening, that a shape is emerging that could not have emerged any other way. What this asks of us is a strange kind of faith, the faith to trust the process even while it hurts, to trust that the hand doing the carving, whether you call it God or fate, or simply the intelligence of your own unfolding life, is not being cruel when it removes something. It is being precise. It is not interested in leaving you as raw material forever. It is working, stroke by stroke, loss by loss, toward the shape that was always, somehow, already waiting inside you. There's a particular kind of tired that has nothing to do with how many hours you slept. You can wake up after 8 hours, after a vacation, after a weekend of doing absolutely nothing, and still feel it. A heaviness sitting just behind your sternum, a low static hum of depletion that no amount of rest seems to touch. Most people call this burnout and leave it there, as if it were simply a matter of overwork. But if you actually sit with that exhaustion, if you get quiet enough to ask it what it's about, it will often tell you something more specific and more uncomfortable. Asterisk. You have been holding something up that was never meant to be carried by you alone. The body keeps a kind of ledger that the mind refuses to read. Long before we consciously admit that a relationship has ended in every way but paperwork, our shoulders already know. Long before we admit a career no longer fits who we've become, our stomach already knows. That tight, low-grade dread we've learned to explain away as just Sunday scaring or just stress. The body is not being dramatic. It is being honest in the one language it has, because we have trained ourselves not to listen to any other. We can talk ourselves out of almost any truth. We are remarkably skilled at that. We can construct elaborate justifications, timelines, reasons why asterisk not yet, why asterisk just a little longer, why asterisk it will get better, asterisk. But the body does not participate in our storytelling. It simply registers the cost, day after day, of forcing something that has already, quietly stopped being true. This is the strange cruelty of pride. It is willing to let the body absorb the bill for a debt the mind refuses to acknowledge. We call it resilience, when really it's often just delay. We praise ourselves for pushing through, for not giving up, for gritting our teeth one more year, one more cycle, one more attempt. And meanwhile the body is sending increasingly loud signals that we've learned to medicate, rationalize, or simply ignore. Fatigue that doesn't lift, sleep that doesn't restore, a joy that used to come easily and now has to be manufactured, performed, forced into existence for the benefit of people who are still waiting for the version of us that existed before the forcing began. What makes this so disorienting is that forcing often looks identical to determination from the outside. Nobody applauds quiet exhaustion. Nobody throws a parade for the person who finally admits their body has been trying to tell them something for 2 years. We reward the grip. We admire the fighter who refuses to let go, without asking whether what they're refusing to let go of has already let go of them. And so the exhaustion deepens in silence, because admitting it would mean admitting that the story we've been telling about our own strength was in some sense a story about avoidance dressed up as willpower. But the body is not your enemy in this. It is in fact the most honest advisor you have, uncorrupted by ego, unconcerned with how things look to others, uninterested in maintaining an image. Its exhaustion is not a malfunction. It is data. It is the most reliable messenger you possess, arriving again and again at your door with the same quiet report. Asterisk, this is costing you more than you are willing to admit, and I am the one paying for it. Asterisk, inside a chrysalis. Something happens that most people find genuinely unsettling once they learn the details. The caterpillar does not simply grow wings the way a child grows taller. It doesn't gradually sprout new features while the rest of its body stays intact. Instead, shortly after the chrysalis forms, the caterpillar's own body releases enzymes that begin to digest almost everything it was. Its organs, its muscles, its old structure. Nearly all of it breaks down into a kind of formless, cellular soup. If you were to cut open a chrysalis at this stage, expecting to find a half-formed butterfly, you would find something that looks far more like failure than transformation. You would find essentially nothing, liquid, undoing, every visible marker of what the creature used to be, gone. And yet inside that formless collapse something extraordinary is quietly happening. Scattered throughout the caterpillar's body are clusters of cells that biologists call imaginal discs, dormant since the creature's earliest larval stage, waiting, unused, for exactly this moment. As the old body dissolves, these cells activate. They begin to organize the liquid remains into something entirely new. Wings, antennae, legs built for a different kind of life altogether. The wings were never added from outside. They were already present, folded into the creature from the very beginning, waiting for the old structure to fully give way before they could take shape. I think about this because so many of us, standing in the middle of our own dissolution, a marriage ending, an identity collapsing, a certainty we built our whole life around suddenly gone, assume we have arrived at ruin. We assume that because nothing recognizable remains, nothing good could possibly be forming. We look at the formless period of our lives, the in-between, the liquid stage where we no longer feel like who we were and don't yet feel like who we're becoming, and we call it failure. We call it falling apart. We ask, often in genuine anguish, asterisk, why is my life dissolving instead of building? But dissolution and formation are not opposites in this process. They are the same event viewed from different angles. The very collapse that feels like undoing is the necessary condition for the reorganization that follows. There is no version of the transformation where the old structure stays fully intact and the new one simply appears alongside it. The old has to give way completely, uncomfortably, sometimes terrifyingly, for the dormant potential already present within you to finally have the material and the space to take form. This is, I think, one of the most quietly devastating and quietly hopeful truths about being human. The parts of you that feel most dissolved right now, the roles you no longer recognize yourself in, the certainties that have liquefied under the pressure of what's actually happened to you, are not evidence that something has gone wrong. They may be evidence that something long dormant in you, something that was always there waiting beneath the surface of your old shape, has finally been given the darkness and the silence it needed to begin its work. The chrysalis looks like nothing is happening from the outside. It is, in fact, the most active period of the entire transformation. There is a canyon in the American Southwest, so vast that standing at its rim, the mind struggles to process the scale of it. Walls of rock stretching down for over a mile, layer upon layer of stone exposing nearly 2 billion years of the planet's history. And the astonishing part is not that some cataclysmic event carved it in a single violent moment. The astonishing part is that it was carved by something soft, water. A river that, on any given day, looks unremarkable, brown, slow in places, offering no visible sign of the immense power it carries. And yet, given enough time, that softness did what nothing hard could do. It didn't smash through the rock. It didn't attack it. It simply continued being water, flowing exactly as water flows, for millions of years, until stone that had stood since before there were eyes to see it finally yielded. There is something in this that unsettles our usual definitions of strength. We tend to associate power with force, with things that push, break, dominate, overcome by sheer aggression. We admire the battering ram, the raised voice, the relentless grip. But water offers a different model entirely, one that is harder to admire in the moment because it doesn't look like anything is happening. Water doesn't fight the rock. It doesn't build up resentment toward the obstacle in its path. It simply moves according to its own nature, again and again, without needing the stone to change quickly, without needing to prove anything, without needing an audience to witness its persistence. It has no ego invested in how long the process takes. This is such a foreign way of living for most of us, because we have been taught that if we want something to change, we must apply force to it, more effort, more pressure, more will. And sometimes that's true. But there is another category of change entirely, the kind that only responds to patience without resistance, to a steady, quiet return to your own nature, regardless of whether the obstacle in front of you seems to be moving at all. The river doesn't measure its progress against the rock's timeline. It simply keeps being water. The carving happens as a byproduct of consistency, not as the goal of confrontation. Think about the parts of your life that have felt stuck despite your best efforts to force them open through willpower alone. The habit you've tried to break through sheer discipline and self-punishment. The relationship you've tried to repair through argument and pressure. The healing you've tried to rush because waiting felt unbearable. Force, in these cases, often produces the opposite of what we want. It creates resistance where there was only inertia. The rock doesn't yield to violence. It yields to time, to consistency, to a kind of soft, unglamorous persistence that looks from the outside almost like doing nothing at all. What the river teaches, if we're willing to learn it, is that surrender and power are not opposites. We've been taught they are. That to surrender is to lose, to soften is to become weak, to stop forcing is to give up the fight. But water surrenders completely to its own nature, and in doing so becomes one of the only forces on earth capable of reshaping solid stone. Its power was never in spite of its softness. Its power was made entirely of it. Before a single stone of a cathedral is laid, before the first arch begins to rise toward whatever heaven the builders had in mind, there is a stage of construction almost no one thinks to admire. The clearing of the ground. Old structures are torn down. Uneven earth is leveled. Roots from trees that have grown there for decades are dug out. Foundations of buildings long abandoned are broken apart and hauled away. None of this looks like building. To anyone walking past, it looks like destruction, like a site of loss rather than a site of creation. And yet every architect in history has understood the same unglamorous truth. You cannot build something enduring on top of what needs to be removed. The clearing is not a delay before the real work begins. The clearing is the real work beginning. We rarely extend this same patience to our own lives. When something is being cleared away from us, a relationship, an old ambition, a self-concept we built our identity around, we experience it almost entirely as loss, because that's what it resembles in the moment. We don't see it as groundwork. We see rubble. We see absence where there used to be structure, and we grieve the structure without recognizing that the very ground beneath it may have been unstable, may have been unable to support what we actually needed to build next. The old walls felt solid, but solid isn't the same as sound. Some structures stand for years not because they're well built, but because nothing has yet tested them hard enough to reveal the cracks. This is, I think, one of the hardest truths to sit with honestly. Sometimes what feels like your life falling apart is actually your life being leveled, on purpose, so that something with real foundation can finally be built in its place. Not punishment, preparation. The difference between those two words determines almost everything about how we survive our own difficult seasons. Punishment asks asterisk, what did I do to deserve this? Asterisk preparation asks asterisk, what is this making room for? The circumstances might look identical from the outside. The same loss, the same collapse, the same unfamiliar emptiness where something used to stand. But the question we choose to ask about it shapes whether we experience it as devastation or as construction. And here is what makes this bearable, even beautiful, once you can see it clearly. Nothing about a cleared lot is permanent. It is not the final state. It is a threshold state, a necessary emptiness that exists only long enough for something new to take root in ground that has finally, truly been prepared to hold it. The absence you're grieving right now may not be a void. It may be exactly what your life required before it could hold the next version of you without cracking under the weight of it. This is why the deepest transformations rarely feel like additions while they're happening. They feel like subtractions, like clearings, like the quiet unbuilding of everything you thought was permanent. But underneath every cathedral that has ever risen toward the sky, there is a foundation dug into ground that was once cleared, leveled, and made ready by hands willing to remove what didn't belong before they ever laid down what would last. Your becoming is asking the same patience of you now, not to mourn the clearing forever, but to trust that it is happening for the sake of something that has not yet been built, but is, even now, quietly being made ready to rise.